Hi, welcome to the Chad Bozarth Show. Thanks for listening. Makenna, thank you so much for joining me.
Of course.
Okay, my first question, I just right out of the gate, I have to know, are
Mm.
you a CIA agent? CIA agent? Are you a secret agent? You are
Mm.
everywhere.
Wow. I would not be able to tell you, even if I were. I'm pretty sure. But I luckily have gotten to be a part of so many incredible things that sometimes it feels as though my life is an action movie.
Yeah. I was
Not quite.
trying to schedule this with you the other day and you were like, "Well, I'm about to get on a plane." Where were you headed to? Congo or
Oh
somewhere?
gosh. Burundi, so neighboring the Congo, yes.
Yes, so just a quick pop over to Burundi.
Yes.
Um, wha- so what are you doing? So what is the difference
Mhm.
between a midwife and a doula? So you are in
Oh,
that
that's a great
world.
question.
Can
Yes.
you can you explain to me? You are going all over the world to these different places and working with mothers. What are you doing? What's the difference between those
Mhm.
two things? Help me out.
That's a great question. I feel like I get it probably the most asked question for a good reason because the birth community and kind of culture, when you're working inside of it or just trying to make a difference in the maternal healthcare crisis, you really do want to know kind of the best ways to help and support families. So a birth doula is someone who emotionally, physically supports labor and childbirth. They learn the ins and outs, the physiology and anatomy of pregnancy, labor, and childbirth. And so when a mom is in a hospital or at a home birth, she is someone who knows different stretches or things that the mom can do to help baby have better outcomes. And then additionally supplies a lot of comfort measures. So the doula is the one running to grab the electrolyte water and the snack, and she's cleaning her house a little bit, and she's doing all kinds of the right things to just help your body produce the most helpful hormones in labor so that your baby comes quickly and that you experience as little complication as possible. Um, there's classes on this a lot of the times. I'm a childbirth educator through a pregnancy center. And so a lot of times couples will come in and we really inspire the dads to become kind of the doula role because none of it is actually, I hope I don't ever get in trouble for saying this, but it's not incredibly difficult. It's something that in plenty of other cultures, we see sisters being the doulas, moms, dads, but only in the Western world would we make an entire career out of helping someone in their vulnerable moments. And so it's a little bit funny that we even have that as a role, as a job, because it's a lot of the simple things that you would just have a committed family member or loved one, a friend kind of do for you. It really is just support. But the difference and the certification process would be that a certified doula does have tested knowledge about anatomy, physiology, and so they are kind of your wisest option, especially with a hospital birth. Doulas will know about all kinds of medical interventions. They can give you a lot of advice and information so that couples are able to make informed decisions. Kind of like a birth manager, or how you might have a wedding planner. You can have like a little bit of a birth planner, a helpful hand, whereas a midwife is a lot more similar to they're your primary healthcare provider. And so they're the ones delivering your baby, administering medication, um, and really like wholly medically responsible for your birth, unless of course a mom needs to transfer to a hospital. Midwives love hospitals, they're life-saving, but besides hospital intervention, a midwife should from beginning to end be able to um, deliver your baby.
Mhm. Okay, that's great clarification. So I have to say, for our first baby, we did have a doula,
Oh
and
sure, yeah.
She was fantastic. And I remember my wife was giving birth. She was doing a great job, and the doctor was doing whatever the doctor was doing. And I was feeling it was like a tense moment. And so
Mm.
I felt like I really needed to be telling my wife to push, you know. And I think I was being kind of annoying to the doctor.
Mm.
So the doula helped me not get kicked out of the delivery room in that instance.
Wow.
She kind of calmed me down and kind of ran interference between me and the delivery doctor. So I'm thankful for that. But yeah,
Oh,
that was a great experience. In fact, I think our doula, I think she's actually a missionary in Africa. Now that I'm thinking about that. Anyway,
incredible.
so
That's
small world.
amazing.
So that is great clarification. So are you a midwife, or tell me kind of what are
Yeah.
you doing?
Yeah, that's great. I started as a birth assistant. I got certified through a birth center in Montana and a program called Go Midwife. And I did independent study with them online for about 2.5 years to try and become a midwife. You don't need a certification to be a birth assistant, but it's really helpful if you find someone who can kind of train you. And that's someone who assists a midwife. So they are medically they're able to do IVs or like some medical things. Sometimes the certification I did allowed us to do that. That's where I started. I only ever wanted to become a midwife. I didn't know what a doula was. I didn't know what a childbirth educator was. I honestly didn't want anything to do with it. All I'd heard from the Lord since I was 16 years old was a missionary midwife. That's really what I had tunnel vision for.
Hmm.
And so I started birth assisting, and I did my first medical outreach a little bit later that year after I became a birth assistant, where I went to the Dominican Republic and spent 2 weeks at a local education hospital. And we saw and kind of supported around 25 births. So it was the first birth I ever saw, and then about 24 more in that
Wow.
same 2 weeks. And then shortly after that, I moved where I
What was
am.
that like? Was that
Yeah.
was that stressful or exciting? Was it what you
Mm,
expected? Like, what was that like?
yeah, it was not the easiest newsletter to write after that, the easiest update, because it was a pretty, I don't want to wholly say like negative experience, but it was an educational hospital. So the women were receiving care for free because all of the staff were medical students. So the woman received whatever care kind of needed to be practiced that day or taught.
Hmm.
And so you saw a lot of medical intervention that I, in my kind of beginner knowledge, was just understanding to be unnecessary, that it
Hmm.
wasn't maybe that the mom needed that to happen to her. It was just something, the sea of students. I mean, there would be like 10 students around one mom.
Hmm.
It was something that they needed to either learn or observe, I had no idea going into it. I thought this was an understaffed hospital that was in poverty that needed all the help it could get. And then I get there and it is literally um, they thought we were Americans who needed experience, and so they were giving us the opportunity to also practice on their patients. And that was the quickest no I'd ever given in my life, to say I don't want that um more than I want, to try and be ethical about this. And so me and a number of the girls were pretty disheartened to understand the reality of the situation, and very
Hmm.
quickly became support people to these women. We would do the little things that we could, but we also didn't want to oppose the hospital staff. And so it was very strange, actually. But plenty of the births ended up being still really magical and beautiful. The first one I saw, tear up, and little did I know I was going to tear up at pretty much every birth I would ever be a part of. It is still the greatest thing in the world when babies come out and they cry. It's the best sound. And so I still did develop appreciation and I think a love for this kind of work. They would let us, something I was trained to do was like cutting the umbilical cord or assisting, a midwife in cleaning up or doing things that definitely ethically felt that they were in my scope. So getting to do some of those things, I didn't realize that it's a bit unusual to like jump at the chance to glove up and handle something really bloody. I thought, oh, surely that gets everyone excited, but that's really where I learned. I think I'm cut out to pursue midwifery, or at the very least, like get to be a part of some of these more intense, but yeah, really exhilarating kinds of moments. And so after that, I began working with YWAM again in a maternal health ministry called Life Bears. I got to work at a pregnancy center in the community where I became a childbirth educator. And then finally, I kind of looped around to say, okay, I know what a doula is now. I know why it matters. And especially that experience in the Dominican really helped me understand why globally women really need support, even if it doesn't feel medically impactful. It's actually creating better medical outcomes because you're able to keep women calm and supported and dignified through something that is really vulnerable and really hard. And so I became a doula, though I swore I never would, and began teaching childbirth education classes in the community in Kona, and then through the pregnancy center. And then I'd get connected with clients through those classes, and I would doula for their births. I was doing it very volunteer in the beginning, and so I got to be a part of people's birth who wouldn't otherwise been able to hire a doula or receive that kind of support. We work specifically with vulnerable families, and so single mothers, young mothers, were able to do a lot of kind of wraparound care for. So in Kona, it looks very scheduled and kind of normal, and you go to their house and you meet them, and then you go to their birth, and then a year from then they invite you to the baby's first birthday, and it's all kind of very fun. But globally, because I go and do international maternal health work, that's very different. Like when we're at hospitals over there, we're kind of uh, delivering their or helping with the delivery of their babies, really the first time that you're meeting most of these moms. And so it's
Oh,
very
wow.
different. Yeah, it's kind of my two worlds are like getting to be with YWAM and Kona and do a very, very close to normal birth worker experience, and then getting to go overseas and be a small part of the birth community in some other areas. But that's mostly where I'm at. I'm still a student in midwifery. I'm having to kind of go back to school. There's a little bit of an issue at some of my schooling I've already completed. And so I've got a long road ahead with transferring credits around and just trying to get certified. And so I'll get to really dig into that in the next few years and finally become a midwife, and then finally have that kind of extra accreditation to really get me through some doors internationally.
Hmm. That is that's so amazing, what you're doing, McKenna. Let me ask you, you know, so many young people get the question, what do you want to be when you grow up? And there's this pressure, and a lot of times, I mean, I'm still trying to figure out what I want to be when I grow up, but you seem to have such clarity. You said going back to when you were 16.
Mhm.
What did that clarity What did that look like for you? Why did you have such clarity at such a young age?
Hmm.
Do you
Yeah,
think?
right. Yeah, my dad was currently the missions director with Christ for the Nations, and he had a bunch of mission students write mock newsletters. So, pretending that they were already
Mm.
on the field, they were writing what they thought a newsletter might sound like. And one of the students in his class had written about becoming a missionary midwife. And I was going through them, I just thought they were cool to look at. At 16, I'd been on a number of short term mission trips with my family. I had completed a missions internship in Cyprus and was really kind of always geared towards getting to do something on the mission field in my adulthood. But it wasn't until I saw that mock newsletter, I thought, God, like, why would why would anyone need to go deliver babies in other nations? That should just be happening normally. Like, aren't they safe? Aren't they provided for? I can't imagine a world where a woman is scared to give birth somewhere, or where that isn't a safe thing to do. And my dad just kind of looked at me. I was like, well, McKenna, like, women and children die all over because of preventable causes.
Mm,
And I looked up for the first time the global maternal healthcare crisis, and found that the World Health Organization is calling for more and more midwives. That this is globally recognized, and not just in any Christian circles, but that it is a massive healthcare crisis, that women and children die of preventable causes. And so when I was looking that up and getting kind of grips for it, I didn't have any experience, any real knowledge to be the spokesperson for such a huge issue, but I was passionate. I was way more curious than I was correct, and way more zealous than I was to have reason for. And so I went back to high school and I stood proudly on my soapbox about the maternal health care crisis. And I would talk to anyone who'd listen to me about this being important. Um, and it didn't make for the prettiest conversations. And I definitely did not have enough data or, yeah, facts to back up what I was talking about. But I was became very, very gripped with this idea that we are missing women and babies that should be here. And I think in my journey with maternal health care and with overseas birth work, I've also understood that we are missing fathers and husbands, and that this is really an attack on the family unit, not unlike plenty of the ways that we're attacked here in more of like a Western context. We see kind of the family be torn at and ripped apart, and we're not seeing like traditional homes the way we used to. And I always thought that was such a great injustice. But then to find out that families are actually being ripped apart, where moms aren't surviving something
mm,
as age old and as traditional and as normal as birth. And I think getting to go and see some of those situations and think, oh, it's because of a lack of resources. We always think of poverty, we always think of a lack of education, they just don't know. But I've been now in hospitals where they do know, and that there are resources, but that governments can be turned so against their own people. And there's a level of corruption that is costing women and children, and ultimately men, when you kind of follow the trail of where this attack leads. It's the crumbling of the family unit on large scales, because yeah, things are not done with integrity, and there's a very real evil. So I was gripped with it once because I thought this is wrong. But then every time I go back out, or every time I see it happen, it just has been more and more, I think, instilled in me, that this is wrong, and that God wants to see families restored. He's always done his work through families. The building blocks of his kingdom have always been families. And so it's just a bigger deal than ever. And so what started out as excitement, curiosity, has very much so hardened and solidified into conviction, to where now I'd like to say I've remained tender towards a lot of these ideas, but I also do think that um, there is a deeper sense of this is right, and I don't think I could be convinced out of it this
mm.
far into the game.
That's what I was going to ask you. What would you say? Because I mean, from my perspective, you have such zeal and energy for this. Compared to maybe the beginning of your journey, what would you say has been the biggest learning or maybe adjustment you've had to make along the
Mm,
way to still have the energy, but also coupled with wisdom and
mm.
facts? And what would you say?
Oh, that is such a great question. Thank you for complimenting my zeal. I like to remember that I am literally about, I'm 4-ish years into like the real work of it, and it's been a bit longer than that, since I was 16. But I sometimes talk as if I'm 50 and I've done this, a million years or something. But I
But it's
it
not
sometimes.
but it's not like chronological time, right? It's like how many what am I trying to say? It's like you've had compressed
Yeah.
intense experience
Right.
that maybe not be reflective of just general,
Mm.
time passing. So you might
Well,
have more,
yes.
yeah, you might have more years of experience than what the clock might say, is what I'm trying to say.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, sure. Like older than my age sometimes,
Yes.
but I do I do appreciate that question too, like thinking about what's kind of kept it from not getting not that there's a way to really become bored of the excitement of birth, but definitely jaded or definitely bitter or definitely disheartened. And I'd love to be like, oh, I haven't like at all, but that's not the truth. It's been a long journey of kind of wrestling through a lot of things that I believe about God and what I believe that God believes about life and about family. But definitely anchored in kind of some marking moments. I was in a country called Guinea-Bissau. It's it's in like the northwest of Africa, and it's on the coast. I've been now twice for about 5 weeks at a time when I was there, and it was kind of a year apart in the visits. Um, but the first time I was there, I think I had just turned 19, or maybe I had just turned 20. And I was leading this team of entry level birth workers. We're going to this local hospital. And I just really felt like this is the real deal. Like I wanted birth centers all over the world. When God first shared with me, I wanted to become a missionary midwife. I just began to dream of all these birth centers. And when I was 16 and God was showing these birth centers to me, it was a really easy yes to make because it changed almost nothing. It cost me nothing to dream and to want these birth centers and to say, sure, I'll go, I'll be the one who does that. And then, fast forward, I'm now 20 and I'm in the most uncomfortable country I've ever been to. It's hot and there's bugs everywhere. And I've been now to this hospital that's in the community that's, I mean, just incredibly unlike anything I've ever seen. Um, the medical tools that they have access to, the hygiene, the conditions are just so below what I would think is a standard for where I've grown up and what I'd expect. And so I was so at a loss. I was leading this team. I had no idea how to lead, and I just hid away to this small part of the base on where we were staying. And I just began to pray and tell God, like, this is too much for me. Like, this is too hard. I've seen women pass away. I've now, been with babies who didn't survive, and this is too much. Like, I don't think I want to keep doing this. And the Lord really came to me in a very like gentle and lowly way, the way that the Bible speaks about Jesus, like with so much humility and even his own vulnerability to say, like, McKenna, I know this isn't easy. This is why you don't see a ton of missionaries here. Like, this is really hard. Um, this is really sad. Like, I'm broken over this. And I'm happy you're here with me to like, daughter, you came and you're seeing it and it's just hard for you. It was so interesting that he didn't like call me into action like a soldier and be like, come on, like I said, do this. Like, didn't you want birth centers? Like, there's none of that in his tone or in his voice. It was just like, I know that this is hard for you. And felt like he was just with me. And then at kind of the end of this prayer, this processing moment, I felt like God said, McKenna, you don't have to do this. If you want to go home and you want to work somewhere else or do something else, I can give you a new assignment. And like this doesn't have to be for you. But if you still want birth centers all over the world, then I will give them to you. And like we will do this together. And it just felt like just one of the most intimate things the Lord has ever invited me into. Like, I was there at my lowest. I felt like a horrible leader, a horrible missionary, a horrible daughter. And here God was saying that He would still trust me with more families and with more projects, even though I felt so, at the end of myself. And so That was a costly yes. You know, at 16, it didn't cost me much, but here at 20, it cost me what seems like everything. And since then, and since knowing that it wasn't that God made me do this or that I have to, it's something He's offering, and that every day, like it's my joy to say I want to work for this. I want to see a difference made in maternal and infant mortality rates. I want to see families restored. I want to see the end of, this kind of suffering. I want to see health reform. I want to see it on a government level. Like this is my joy. Whereas I think up until that point, I really thought like, well, this is what's expected of me, or this is what I'm called to. I felt a little bit trapped in that wording,
Mm,
calling. I felt like this is what I
mm.
have to do. But in that moment, really feeling like, no, this is something God's in His kindness, like given me a choice. And I want this. I want this more than anything, because if I don't want birth centers all over the world, then I'm just going to spend the rest of my life talking about it. And so like this is a shot to actually get to do it and to do it with the Lord. So very much so anchored in that moment. There are so many times I think like, oh, gosh, I'm horrible at this, or it's taken me way longer than I thought to become a real certified midwife, or this one team, this one pregnancy center that we've like pioneered in this other country didn't work out to what I thought it was going to be. Like I should be done. Um and it always kind of brings me back to that moment like, no, no, God's in this, and I'm really committed to it. And the same goes for really emotionally difficult moments where life did not seem to be the thing that always wins, where love didn't seem to win, and where there was a lot of suffering and hardship. And again, going back to that moment and saying, I know this is something that God is fighting for and has taught me to fight for. And I'm not going to ignore these hard things. Like I've again had like many more moments where I've had to come to the Lord empty-handed and ask for strength and to be filled. Um, but really for me, it helps to understand that in God's kindness, I get to work with Him. Missions is not my great gift to God. Missions is God's great gift to me. And that's not my quote. Somebody else said that. And I just think, wow, that is exactly how I feel. Like this is something I get to do. So very long answer, but very much kind of where I pull from these days.
That is, no, that's a great answer. Let me ask you this. How do you deal with, you have this training, you have this skill set. How do you navigate being in a different country where they've been taught different things than you have,
Hmm.
or um, and they have a perspective that's not the perspective that you have?
Yeah.
And how do you deal with that potential conflict? I don't know
Hmm.
if I'm asking that question right.
I
Um,
think, yeah, how we can, because there's a lot of offense when you first get somewhere and you feel like the doctor does something you'd consider to be medical malpractice.
right.
It's wrong, but it's something that there is completely normal, um, or not something that you have the power to advocate against. And this is best answered or best comforted with community development principles and understanding where where there's a book actually. It's called When Helping Hurts, and it kind of explores these themes of coming in with all the answers or all the resources or all the things can actually cause much more harm than good. Um, and so the very first step for me was changing definitely my own heart and my own mentality that most likely these people are not evil or trying to commit evil. Most likely the system was set up this way because of a worldview issue. It's a totally different worldview than I have. So um, understanding a culture and how they're thinking is, I mean, that's like a lifelong effort. I'm not saying it like it's some easy thing, but when we get somewhere, it's always great to hear from locals, the local YWAM base, or um, I mean, as close as you can get to people who were born in that country, but sometimes even the base staff have lived there 10 plus years. They're going to be able to give you a great understanding. And getting into the hospitals, I remember my first time again in Guinea-Bissau, there was another medical team that was visiting from Portugal. They were university students and they were just volunteering. It was like a humanitarian aid program. But we were there with the love of Jesus, on a missions assignment. And so we're both at the same hospital. We're both witnessing a lot of really ugly stuff, whether it was things the hospital did or like, uh, just the condition of the women who were coming in. And my team is viewing all of this injustice, the same injustices they're seeing, but we were able to go back to base, to enter the prayer room, to weep and to grieve and to ask the Lord for strength and solution in a way that this other team didn't, wasn't, they weren't, that's not what they came to do. And so they were bitter and jaded. I mean, within a few days, they were muttering comments to us the whole time, like, can you believe this? They were cold shoulder and rude to the nurses and doctors.
Mm,
And we found out that that college in Portugal, that university, for years, for decades, have been sending humanitarian teams to this hospital. And anyone could observe that there was no significant change being made. And so
wow.
our team is there for the first time, and we're thinking, we don't want to be like this university. We don't want to send teams here forever. I think there's an importance to exposure and for students to have some well-rounded experience, but we are so much more committed to the lasting change of a nation than we are to our teams just going to kind of mess around and come back. And so for me as a staff of the maternal health school through the University of the Nations, I knew right then, like, we can't just send teams that are doing whatever they want and then kind of coming back. Like, we have to love this hospital, we have to love these nurses and these doctors more than we love the momentary experiences like we can kind of reap or like gouge from this outreach. And we invited those students to come with us to a village outreach that we were doing on a weekend to just set up shop and do triage and prenatals for the women in this village, and they came with us. And then we invited them to one of the base services also. So they were Catholics, they enjoyed it, and we kind of became good friends from it and said, you know what, like, we're seeing the exact same things, but you're carrying it with bitterness and jadedness. We're carrying it with hope. And it's not that we didn't care about the injustice. Like, everyone is angry. We just know the righteous anger of God who is after his daughters and who wants to see significant change. And so our anger was charged with like a compassion for the nurses and the doctors, and not to say it perfectly, but like that's what we were aiming for. And so my second time back in Guinea-Bissau, I really got to invest in some of the doctors, the midwives, the nurses from that hospital. We would sit in the hallway and talk for a long time, sometimes with translation. Some of them just have great English, and we just became friends. And when babies passed or moms weren't receiving the care that that should have been there for them, our team would cry. And not in a showy way, like we didn't want the mom to see us crying or anything like that, but in the hallways, I mean, we grieved for these patients, and the hospital staff totally understand why they can't cry every time. They'd never get anything done. They'd be crying
Yeah.
all the time. But
Yeah.
um we kind of could even see some of that humanity restored with the nurses when they'd say, wow, you really care about them. And it wasn't for a moment that I thought I cared more about these patients than those nurses or those doctors. And I know they care. But I think doing that job every single day, they just became really had to kind of put some walls up. And so getting to hear their experience, just like, I felt like we ministered to them in a way with our tears. and they ministered back to us in their dedication that they're here every
Mm.
day. And we got to learn a lot about how the government funds healthcare in Guinea-Bissau. And there's a lot of it that is really difficult to hear. So some of these doctors and nurses, they don't get paid for months on end. And so we found out this one practice that they did was actually because they weren't being paid. And so charging families was the only way that they were receiving any compensation. So it's something we didn't agree with, but then we come out and find, oh, okay, I kind
Mm.
of understand why you're doing that. Or for instance, this one isn't maybe the most like table talk, but there's kind of a medical intervention that we really disagree with being used unnecessarily. We thought, hey, that's wrong to medically intervene on this woman's behalf when she hasn't even gotten, to really try pushing without this medical intervention. And so we really disagreed with them. We rolled our eyes. We thought, oh, that's not right. And we started talking to some of the nurses, and we found out they do that to women because most women in that region have experienced a very severe injustice. It's called FGM, is like the acronym for it, but it's a mutilation of a
Mm.
woman's body that happens when they're very young. And this
Mm.
whole village in Guinea-Bissau, most of the surrounding villages as well, do this to all of their women. And so by the time they come to give birth, there is mutilated anatomy. And so the
Mm.
doctors now have to deal with that. And so their practices actually reflected what needed to happen for that in order for that baby to even be born. But we didn't see that. We only saw where we disagreed with them. And so it's funny that the longer I spend in another country, um, where you would think there's all these reasons, you would think you would find more things to disagree with the longer you stay, but the longer I've stayed, the more I found that we actually agree, and that it's
Mm.
fundamental worldview issues that are causing these problems, but that a lot of the people I've gotten the honor of working with handle situations much like I would if I were in their shoes, or they're handling it even better like than I would think too. And so um it's hard seeing a worldview issue. I've plenty of examples of things where women are viewed as subhuman, or less worth or value than the men in that community, and the medical repercussions of thinking that way, how they're treated being just vastly different. And yet a lot of the care they're receiving and the way that things function aren't inherently evil. It just is being stemmed from a worldview that is not in alignment with what the Bible teaches. And so it's strange because you disagree with that worldview, but then the fruit of it can sometimes be just really difficult to handle because they think they're right and you think they're wrong, and they think you're wrong. And so the principle of community development to always try and target the worldview, because if you don't target that, you can change the fruit momentarily, but then the fruit will always come back because the worldview is just so drastically different.
Mm.
So we have a community development week in our schools, so no one is going on our outreaches without going through that week and getting at least some bare bones understanding of not going into a culture thinking you know everything, and not trying to get in a fist fight with any nurses over something that you just don't understand. But also to definitely give a holistic answer, there are plenty of times where there was no good reason for a nurse or a doctor to do something that they did, and there is anger and disappointment and upset, and that is usually handled by always taking it to God, going to the prayer room, trying to figure out like why we're feeling this way. And then in small increments, we have gotten to see change by conversation, by friendship with those nurses and doctors, been able to say, that like, can you explain to me why you did that? Or can I maybe explain to you what our protocol in hospitals in America might be like? Not that they're perfect, but like, have you ever considered this alternative? And one time in this hospital, we spent this whole week seeing a lot of injustice, but trying to like always bank on relational equity, like really pouring into the nurses and doctors, getting poured into by the nurses and doctors. We like bake this big cake, and baking a cake in like a third world country without measuring cups or ingredients is really hard. So we like put in a day's work for this cake and we brought it to the hospital and we like gave it to them and we prayed for them. And one of the doctors looked at us and just said, "You've been with us, you know, all these weeks and you've seen how we do things. Is there anything we do that you would do different? And can you
Mm.
tell us about it?"
Wow.
And so there is hope yet for change and for conversations like this. I don't know how confidently I could say that it's a like short term easy fix. A lot of it, I think, the ones I've seen work have always been through some sort of somewhat consistent relationship. And always being more curious than we are critical, coming in with questions. Um, but yeah, handle it a little bit differently each time.
I think that's a fantastic answer. It's a difficult thing. Um, I'm constantly kind of thinking about those types of issues, really. I really appreciate hearing your
Yeah.
perspective on that and your experience. Makenna, as we wrap up, thank you so much for what you're doing. I was talking to your dad the other day, and I said, I really want McKenna to influence my daughter. Like how can we make that happen? But what would you say? I guess thinking back to growing up, I guess I could ask your parents at some point. But was there something that they did that stood out to you as far as you're traveling around the world, you're doing these things. It's very unique what you're doing. Is there something you could think of? I'll let you say something positive about your parents. Um,
Perfect.
yeah. Is there something that you could point to that they kind of did that maybe had a significant contribution to how you are today as far as just traveling all over the world and kind
Mm,
of being independent and impacting so many lives? And what would you say to somebody who's maybe a young person listening to this and they want to do something similar to what you're doing?
mm,
What would you tell that person?
mm. Wow. Also great question. On like a scientific answer for, I think, the way I'm wired to feel confident to explore, whether it's physically, geographically explore, or just uh relationally feel comfortable meeting new people and things, really comes from having a secure attachment. So there's the attachment theory with newborn babies and responding to children's cries and making sure that they know that there is someone out there to take care of them. I've
Mm,
taken the trust-based relational intervention, TBRI, done their 40-hour course on like how to understand yeah, like children who come from rough places and trying to like restore some of that attachment. And so when we teach childbirth education classes, we really teach parents that the first few years of a child's life, they're really developing trust and critical thinking and problem solving. And so being there for them in those days is what setting your children up for success. You're not going to have a clingy teenager because you have a clingy baby. Babies are born clingy, like they can't do anything else. And so
mm,
huge advocate for like parents showing up for their children in those ways, and they get to grow up confident that they have somewhere to go back to. I
mm,
have struck out a lot in the nations. I've come home battered and bruised, but I've come home because I had somewhere to go. And so I think you are much more likely to try new things when you know that you have a safe place to land if they don't work out. um but definitely as I've grown up, I have like the best stories of my mom and dad. I joke that they've given me an arsenal of sermons because I can always pull something from what they did and turn it into how it's an attribute of God. And I flatter them so much that my friends actually get really excited to meet them. And they're like, I just want like your dad to pour into my life or minister to me. Like he sounds so cool. And he is so cool, but he's also just like my dorky dad. And so he jokes with me a lot, like, you need to
Hey, he helped put together. I needed help converting this crib into a bed in my kids'
okay.
room, and I texted him one day, and he popped over, and that's your
He's
dad. I
great.
mean,
Yes.
anyway, sorry to
He's
interrupt, but
great.
that's
It's
your dad.
true. He's as good as the stories say. He gets on my case now. He's like, "Stop making me sound so cool," because I'm a huge letdown when people meet me. And so, of course, I have to do him justice and only tell even better stories now because he is that cool. But definitely, I thought of this more recently, and I do think it's very practical. But when I when I was experimenting with how I thought about things, I kind of dove into actually a world of like feminism in early high school. And I had a sense for injustice, but I didn't have all the facts to like figure out how I really felt. And feminism is just a great example because I'm a woman and I work with women now. But there are plenty other kind of ideas or things that were like popular when I was in high school. I was a vegetarian for a while. I was into a little bit of like veganism influence. All like a parent's nightmare probably. And so coming home and telling them like, I think this way about this topic, or I feel very strongly about this organization or project, instead of getting really afraid of that happening, I feel like they frequently provided me with more information and were open to conversation and stood very firmly on how they felt, but it wasn't an immediate shutdown of my
Mm,
thoughts or my kind of process. And so I quickly was able to learn on my own that what I truly thought about the feminism movement, the good things, the really bad things, and now am so confident in how I believe God views women, and so confident in like a biblical worldview on womanhood, on femininity. I feel more empowered than ever to be discipled by and disciple other women. And that season was so small, that kind of episode of fiery activism. But if it were stomped out and if it were met with a lot of disapproval, I think that inner childlike rebellion could have pushed me even further.
mm,
But I was able to really kind of flesh out different ideas with my parents and not maybe feel like I couldn't think that way or had to stay in some sort of line. And because of that, um, I'm much more adventurous with my question asking. I want to understand, and thankfully in adulthood I've really established a great foundation and don't think I stray nearly as far as I used to, but I don't feel nervous to yeah, ask different questions or try and figure things out because I've never been reprimanded
mm,
for doing that. And so there's like a confidence to kind of explore, meet new people, and understand like, okay, what do I really believe about this? And my dad is a great question asker, and he always kind of picked my brain about it. He'd be like, well, do you really think that, or let's talk about this. That's a really good point. And I think like taking
mm.
me seriously helped me understand that like yeah, the questions I ask are important and hold weight. And then when I actually find the truth, I am way more excited about it because it wasn't somebody else's idea. It was something I got to test and to prove. And I believe it more with more conviction because I've had to test it. It wasn't something that just kind of got passed down to me.
Mm. That's a really good answer. Thank, yeah, thank
Really
you
good
for that.
parents.
Yeah, that's really good. Well, um, thank you for that, McKenna. So
Yeah.
as we wrap up, so what would you say to somebody who's like a young person who maybe wants to take a
Okay.
similar path? Sorry, my first question was really long. That
Yes.
included two
No.
questions.
Well, yeah, no, I think I got even carried away in my own answer. I just definitely been thinking about that a lot, but this is a great one too because 'Cause it's so funny to think I would have anything to say to, like, someone else being feeling very much, still in the throes of it as a young person still. But a really great answer that or a really great, point that I've recently been thinking a lot about and don't follow perfectly myself, but am more and more kind of trying to, is to is is to ask questions to people who have done it. So
Mm,
reading books about Hudson Taylor and Amy Carmichael, like if you want to be anything like these people, um, to find out. And I recently did a course in biblical worldview and like early church history, and got to read about a ton of different revivals. And a bunch of them were things that I never imagined had ever happened. Like when I think of
mm,
Europe, I don't think of these different revivals, that happened. I don't think about the first time the Bible was ever translated into English or all these great people. And so the more I've surrounded myself with that kind of content, the more faith I do have from my life and the impact it could make. But
mm.
also the more humility to realize you are not the first person who's ever thought about this happening or doing this. It's like humbling at first because you're like, oh, I thought, my dream was unique. But then after a short
We've all
stint
been
of
there, McKenna. We've all
yeah,
been there.
after a short stint of humility, genuinely makes me feel way less alone. Maternal healthcare is a hard mountain to conquer, and it's about this big compared to the family restoration mountain that's kind of, in conjunction with that. And so there's plenty of times I feel like we're the only ones doing it, or I I don't feel personally that alone. I have an incredible team that's done this since before I was born, but I can sometimes feel like, oh, YWAM Kona is the only expression of this, or our teams are the only ones that are really going specifically for this. And to understand how many maternal family kind of themed projects have been sent or teams have been sent and organizations that exist, again, humbling at first, and then you think, wow, I'm so glad I'm not in this alone. And so for young people, I feel like I hear this a lot through YWAM, like DTS students, or DTS is like the initial program. So young, like fresh out of high school, people are like, wow, I'm so wrecked for like the end of human trafficking, or I'm so wrecked for the end of substance abuse, or all these like really big, incredible kind of feats that they have. And it's incredible. I'm so inspired hearing them talk about it. But then there is kind of reminds me when I was 16 and like just found out about a global healthcare crisis, thinking, I'm the first person who's like ever thought this, and I'm gonna
Mm,
single-handedly like fix it.
yeah.
And that same like very, very infectious and sweet energy kind of rubs off like from these kids, and I can only feel compassion to be like, oh my gosh, like it's it's so epic you're gripped with this. You're taking God at his word. Like that is so admirable. But like partner yourself with a big organization that does this for a living, who like can set up leadership retreats that you can go to and learn more about it, and can get you connected with outreaches actually do it. And so that for me has been like the best tool in the world. At 16 I thought I was going to be a missionary midwife who single-handedly puts up birth centers all over the world, and I am thankful every day that I have partnered myself and used YWAM as a platform to have a way wider reach, a bigger network of students to come in to take maternal health care schools, to go to the nations as entry level birth workers, to pioneer pregnancy centers, to train local people and walk with families as we believe for their restoration. And so I couldn't have done any of that alone. I don't want to do any of that alone. And I'm thankful for the giants that I get to walk on the shoulders of when I am thinking of maternal health care. There are way better projects out there, way cooler people and teams that I get to pull from and be inspired by. And so for any young person who would want to accomplish something that feels way too big, I'd say I am literally right next to you. I feel the exact same way. And the best thing we can do is like inspire ourselves with those stories and kind of surround ourselves with people like that.
Hmm. McKenna, that was fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and for spending this time. And you're doing an amazing job. And so thank you for what the work that you're doing.
Oh wow, Chad, thank you so much for thinking of me for this and for listening, asking great questions.
Absolutely. Hopefully we can do it again sometime.
Awesome.